If you master personal finance, then you are setting yourself up for financial success. But so many people fail to get it right, and some only do a bit right. But in this episode, we're going to take you through all the steps you need to put in place to be a personal finance Jedi.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, where every Thursday morning, property investors come to be informed and inspired. In this episode, we're going to talk about budgeting. We're going to talk about cutting back. And that might not sound very inspiring, but we're going to make you realise in this episode that it's nowhere near as intimidating as you might think it is. And you don't even have to deprive yourself in order to build a firm financial foundation and pave the way for all the investments you want to make. So we've got an easy, actionable, step-by-step guide coming up for you. And stick around to the end, because as if that weren't enough, we've got a triple bill of Hub Extra.
We've had a load of government announcements this week around easing off measures now and in the future. And there's so much that's impacted property that we can't cover it in this little segment. But luckily, for the time being, we have our market updates every Friday, where Rob and I discuss what is happening in the world of property and beyond, and what that means for you. So make sure you join us for tomorrow's episode.
Yep, so that episode will drop into your feed tomorrow, and we'll be covering everything that's been announced this week. Then on next week's podcast, we're going to be doing a couple of things. We're going to talk about what those new measures are meaning for the market right now, because by that time we'll have some data and observations from our own business to share. And we'll also be looking to the future. When we last talked about what the coronavirus would mean for the property market and the economy longer term, it had to be so heavily caveated with lots of things about how we didn't know how long this would all be going on for and what an effect that would have. Well, we still don't completely know, but we know a lot more than we did a few weeks ago. So on the Property Podcast, next Thursday, our most informed predictions yet about what the long term looks like for property. Not an episode you'll want to miss.
So currently, as we record this, we're all in isolation. And unless you're a rule breaker, there's not much you can do about that. But there is loads that you could be doing instead. And lots of people are making best use of this time that they have now. As we've discussed previously, it's an amazing time to buy, or at least prepare yourself to buy. And you want to be ready for that. So right now is a great opportunity to get on top of your finances, to be ready for that purchase, or just generally get everything finance-wise in order. So this week, we're going to get you organised. We're going to run through a series of steps to make sure that you and your finances are in good shape. Now, you may have heard some of these before, but some of them are probably going to be new to you. So make sure you listen to the end to capture all the points.
Rob, before we get to that first step though, I feel like I need to make myself a bit unpopular and deliver some tough love as a bit of context for this. Because within literally days of the lockdown being announced, I started getting emails from people who were property owners, landlords, who were really freaking out that their tenants might miss a rent payment. And if they did miss a rent payment, then they wouldn't be able to pay their mortgages. And this is before mortgage holidays had become a thing and all the rest of it. And while that's not a nice situation to be in, I really think that if you can't pay your mortgage after one missed rent payment, then you're just not running your business right. The cause doesn't have to be a global pandemic. It can be any number of things. If you're living that close to the edge, at some point, something is going to happen that tips you over. Now, we've all seen the surveys that say that a shockingly huge proportion of the UK public in general don't have a month of savings or wouldn't be able to meet an unexpected £500 expense. And that is shocking. And some of those people, I'm sure, could be running their finances a lot better. But we also have to recognise that a lot of people, through no fault of their own, are in very difficult financial circumstances. As property investors, though, we are already in a privileged position. We own assets. It might not feel like it, but we're right up there by the standards of the population at large. So because of that, I don't think there's much excuse for having your business and your personal finances in a perilous situation. So many people listening will already be doing a lot of the things that we talk about, but many won't. And I don't think anyone will be doing any of it. So if the current situation has exposed a weakness in your finances, maybe it's a bit of a wake-up call, then this is the perfect episode for you.
Now, Rob's been pretty tough there, and I understand why. What I will do for everyone, though, is give us all a little bit of an out, because we're not taught this stuff. Personal finance is not on the agenda at school. We don't get taught about budgeting and all these disciplines and measures that actually are quite basic, but never passed on to us. Or you have to be quite fortunate that someone in your life has passed this on to you. Normally, you have to go out and find this knowledge and find this education. So for many people who are finding themselves struggling, it's just because they don't know what to do. Well, we're going to put you right now. Even if you are budgeting to some level, after these steps, you should be in an even better place. And if you aren't doing anything right now, well, your whole financial landscape can completely change. And the first thing you need to understand, the amount you save, or the ability you have to save, is after your income, minus your spending, what is left is your potential savings. Now, what a lot of people do is have income and spend until there's nothing left. So they go, right, this is my spending account. But actually, once you've spent what you need, then if you have the discipline, you can put the rest away in savings. But what happens if you're in the habit of spending all your money every month? Or that even if you are a bit disciplined, your income minus expenses still nets off to zero, or worse, below. There are some simple quick wins that you can do straight away to move things back in your favour. The first thing is go through your last month's bank statement and just check everything in there. You'll be surprised how a little direct debit can sneak in there of a service that you no longer use, still goes in every month. Or you're paying for an insurance product or something else that you signed up for years ago that's still going out. There could be a number of things that you're spotting, and it could help you spot trends that can help you change your behaviour as well. Often people talk about cutting back coffee and making it yourself at home, rather than paying Starbucks or another big chain every single day. But once you look at that bank statement and you see, wow, I am spending a couple of £100 a month on coffee, that can give you the wake-up call to maybe not stop completely, but change your habits, maybe change your coffee shop or maybe make your own. But what it will do is it'll give you that awareness, which is really powerful. So you cut out the things that you wouldn't miss or wouldn't miss much, and that will start to make a huge difference. The next thing to do is renegotiate or switch your major bills. So look at your energy bills. Often by switching, you can save yourself money. Sky or Virgin or whatever TV supplier you use, you can nearly always get a better deal. If your original deal period has run out, then you are almost certainly going to be overpaying. I recently went through that exercise with my Sky TV, chopped a little bit back, changed a few things, but still had all the core things I wanted and pushed for a deal. Saved myself £50 a month. That's £600 a year. That's a weekend away or a real increase on your savings pot. So these savings, these quick wins do exist. Do that now. There are services to help you do things like this. There is the Money Saving Experts Energy Club. They will help you find the best deals by alerting you when a better deal is on offer. It's a no-brainer. And another tip, make sure you do this every year. Just put it in your calendar as a recurring event, just to remember to go and check your Sky bills, your utility bills, and whatever else you have on, and any other service providers you have. And just make sure you're getting the best deals. If you do that every year, then you'll be quids in.
I think that's such a great point, Rob, about doing it annually, because it always creeps back in. However focused you are on your finances, some non-essential or non-optimum spending always comes back in. I think of myself as being quite financially disciplined, or a bit of a Scrooge, depending on how you want to look at it. But even so, recently I went through and did that. I managed to take out all kinds of things that weren't really adding much value. And I think that's the key. We're not saying here that you need to cut it down to the absolute bare bones and deprive yourself of everything you enjoy. The point is that there'll always be a percentage of your spending that isn't really improving your life in any way, or you can find a cheaper way of meeting that desire. So if you do that, there's really no downside. Your life doesn't get any worse and your savings go up. So that's a really powerful exercise, and one that you should do right now if you haven't done it for a year or more. Having done that, the question then becomes, do you need to have a budget to keep on top of your spending and make sure it doesn't get out of hand? The conventional advice is always, step one, make a budget. That's given to you as the first thing you should do. I don't think it's as clear cut as that. A budget can be really helpful if you struggle with your spending, and you'll have got an insight from that from going through the exercise that Rob just talked about. If you respond well to giving yourself strict rules to follow, then having a budget can be extremely powerful. So you can just allocate pots of money for different things, making sure that there's enough left over for the saving you want to do at the end, and everything takes care of itself. And when we get to Hub Extra towards the end of this episode, we've got a resource that will help you with that. But I don't think budgeting necessarily is right for everyone. It might be the case that your spending is reasonably in check anyway, or you might even be, like I am, the kind of person who'd actually rebel against myself telling me to do something and find the whole exercise a negative experience. So I wouldn't say you necessarily need to have a budget. It depends on you, but it is important to be conscious of how much you're spending. It's so easy, especially now with contactless, to just spend money without even really realising you're spending it. So something I did for years was not actually have a budget, but I just wrote down every day everything that I spent. I had an app that I used to track it, and I found that just having that awareness meant that I spent less without having to force myself to stick to a budget. So that's an alternative, but maybe a budget is for you, or maybe you don't need either of those things and just doing that annual audit is going to be enough. It depends on your personality, it depends on your situation, it depends on how ambitious you are. But one thing's for sure, you definitely need to be doing something.
So we've given you the easy wins, but you can make more painful cuts if the goal is important enough to you. If you need to save a pot to get started in investment, well, that's pretty motivating. And you may then consider to go this next step. And that's looking at your biggest costs, things like accommodation, your food bills, childcare, transport. You can't change them overnight or over a phone call, but by changing your habits or making some decisions, you can make some big changes to how much you save every single month. So first of all, if you own your own home, check your mortgage rate. Are you on the best product? Have you drifted onto a standard variable? If you have, then you're probably no longer on the best product. Now, where we are as we record this, the coronavirus has thrown things up in the air and not all mortgage products are available right now. But in a month or two, the majority, if not all of them, will be back. So put it in your calendar to review your mortgage rate and make sure you're getting the very best deal. Now, if that sounds a bit intimidating to you, then work with a mortgage broker. They should be able to quickly tell you, without charging you, whether they think they can save you money or not. Then if they charge a fee, it should be more than covered with the savings that you can make. If you don't own and you rent, well, now is a great time to move into a new rental and negotiate a great price. Landlords, investors are understandably taking on tenants at reduced rates just to get somebody into their properties if they're vacant. But even after things calm down, you can still be crafty. If you see a new build development come up in any town or city and there's a lot of rental properties on there, you can go in and just put low offers into multiple properties and see if one accepts. They might not, but it's worth a go. Taking it further, you could move into a smaller, cheaper home without moving too far away from where you currently live and save hundreds and hundreds of pounds every single month. It will mean that you have to make some sacrifices, but they don't have to be huge. You could still live and be in the area you want to be and not have your lifestyle affected too much, but have your bank account dramatically changed in a positive way. And if you live in a city, do you need a car? Ditching a car could make a big difference. Or if you live outside of a city, do you need all the cars you have? If you have 2 or 3, could you live with 1 or 2? Don't just dismiss it, think about it. Because if you can do that, again, you're going to be saving loads of money. So you don't have to do all of those suggestions that I've just ran through. But if you do 1 or 2 of them, the state of your finances in a not too distant future are going to be looking a lot more rosy.
Definitely. It's worth considering all of those. Your first reaction might be, no, definitely not. So you think, I couldn't possibly make do with just 1 car, or we really need this size house with these 2 spare bedrooms because otherwise where are we going to put everything? And you know what? Maybe you're right. But it's worth questioning your assumptions around this stuff. Often when you work past that first reaction and you start giving it some real quality thought, there might be solutions out there, any of the areas that we've talked about, or any others where you spend a significant portion of your income, where there's the potential to make some big savings. Again, like I said earlier, this is about being conscious with your spending. It's about having the best life you can as inexpensively as you can. Sounds a bit deep, but money is a very personal subject. So that's enough saving now. We're not going to ask you to cut back any further. We're going to move on to the next step, which is paying yourself first. This is an idea that comes from the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We've talked about it when we did an episode of the podcast and indeed a video about the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which we'll link to in the show notes. The concept here is that now you should know how much you're able to save. It should be at least something, and it should be more than you were saving before. Now you need to automate that. Don't rely on it just being left over, because chances are, however disciplined you are, if you see the money there is a chance that it might end up getting spent on something. Instead, at a set time, so if you get paid on the same day each month, then just after that date, set up a standing order to whisk however much you want to save out of your normal everyday account and into a dedicated savings account. In other words, you treat it like any other bill. Your mortgage or your rent comes out, your direct debits for your utility bills come out, and at the same time as that, or even before any of that, your savings bill, if you want to think about it that way, comes out. The great thing about that is then it just happens. You don't have to think about it ever again. Just check back in a few months and that savings pot has built up. The other nice thing about this is what it's saying psychologically. You're not saying, oh, well, I'll save whatever is left over, which hopefully now I think there will be. You're saying saving comes first. My future investments come first. And that's reflected in the way that you organise your finances. So it's a very simple concept, but for me, it's a very powerful one.
So what do you do when you start to pay yourself first and you start to build this savings pot? Well, you need to build an emergency fund first and foremost, because if you don't, you could get yourself into trouble if you just get started. So save up at least 3 months worth of personal expenses. Now, some people may feel more comfortable with pushing this to 6 months. But if you go 3 to 6 months, then you're going to be in a much better place than the majority of people in this country. Now, the amount you save will depend on your personal circumstances. If you are a freelancer with multiple clients, then you may be comfortable with just 3 months because the chances of all your clients disappearing overnight are pretty slim. But if you are a contractor and your contract could end at any point, well, then your income goes to zero. So you may want to go to more the 6 month end of the range. And other factors will come into play as well, your general tolerance to risk, whether it's just for you or if you have other people dependent on you, like a family. All these things will help you make a decision on how much. And remember, you can go beyond 6 months, but after that point, it's probably overkill. And remember, it's not just for your personal expenses. If you're a property investor and you already have properties, you need to be able to cover a reasonable worst case of voids and costs for a number of months as well. So if one tenant stops paying for 1 month and you're in trouble, that's not good enough. You need to get that pot built up before you redistribute it elsewhere.
So you've gone through, you've optimised your spending, you've automated your saving, you've built up your emergency fund. Surely, time to invest now? Well, maybe, but there could be one more step. It's time to take a look at your debts. In the Rich Dad Poor Dad episode that we referenced earlier, we talk at some length about this concept of good debt versus bad debt, which is really important to understand. Some people, because of the way they've brought up or some of the things that they've read or seen around them, just have this blanket view that debt is a bad thing and they don't want to take on any mortgage debt at all, even if it's for making investments. And that can really slow them down when it shouldn't do. But there are some debts that are bad and you should be looking to pay them off before you start investing. There's a really simple rule to know whether you should be paying off the debt before you start investing or not. And it's this: if the interest rate that you're paying on your debt is higher than the return you'd expect to make by investing that money, then you should pay off the debt. In other words, if your interest payments on your existing debt are £100 a month and your investment could bring in 70, then obviously you'd be better off not making that investment and just getting rid of the debt first. It's not as fun, it's not as exciting, but it's the right thing to do. So if you've got credit card debt, that normally is a contender to pay off straight away because the interest rate could be high. On the other hand, a lot of people have got old-style student loans where the interest rate is really very low. You might choose to pay that kind of loan off because emotionally you don't want it anymore and you'd rather have a clean slate. But based purely on the numbers, the right thing to do is likely going to be to just keep gradually paying that down and use that money to invest instead.
So now you really are ready to invest. So when you get going, don't stretch yourself too thin. Remember, you'll need to cover the costs until your investment is up and running. And then once it's up and running, you may have a bit of a void period to begin with. You don't want to be wiped out at the beginning. So make sure you have some money put away to begin with. We've talked about that already, the emergency fund, but make sure you don't ignore that step because otherwise you can get yourself in hot water pretty quickly. And then when that income does start to build up and turns into savings, be patient. Let it build up. Don't start diverting that cash into different areas straight away. And definitely don't just start spending it on your lifestyle and living a bit of a flashier life. Let that pot accumulate, first for security reasons, and then for investment reasons. Because before you know it, that pot will be sizable, and then you can reinvest and increase your income even further.
So we've talked a lot in this episode about saving. And that is really important. Saving is the cornerstone of personal finance. However much you're earning, if everything's going out the door because you've got no handle on your lifestyle and you're spending willy-nilly, then you're never going to get anywhere. But it's really important to recognise that controlling your spending is only half of the equation. As we said back at the start, the amount that you save is the amount you earn minus the amount you spend. So cutting the amount you spend is great, but it has a flaw to it. There's only so much you can cut away. So once you've had those easy wins, you've optimized as much as you can, then it's time to flip it and start looking at the other part, which is your income. And this is much harder to give advice about because it's different for every person. But it's well worth spending some time thinking about because the amount that you can cut has a flaw, but the amount that you can earn is limitless.
Now, you will need to be a bit more creative when it comes to bringing in income, but it doesn't have to be hard. And yes, it will require a bit of effort too, but as Rob said, there's no limit to the upside. So a quick win for most people is just going through your house and doing, what do we not use anymore? And list it on eBay or Facebook or any other marketplace that you think it might sell and bring in that revenue. If it's gathering dust for you, why leave it there? And remember, you may see it as junk, but one person's junk is another person's treasure. You'll be amazed at what people will buy, and it will add up. A few pounds here, a tenner there, and suddenly, if you've cleared your house out of all that, what you think is junk, you could have made hundreds of pounds. That's an easy win, and it's something you can do probably every couple of years. It's a double win though. You're clearing out your clutter, something you probably wanted to do for ages, and you're bringing in revenue. But there are other easy things you can do as well. I've got a friend who goes on eBay. He looks for expensive brands that people spell incorrectly. And he goes to those listings, buys them because no one else is looking for that spelling, and then lists them properly and makes a nice income. Doesn't change his life, but it's that little extra helps. And it's that little extra you can put into a saving pot. Or if you spot an area where something's been sold for really cheap, and then you can find somewhere else where it'll be selling for more, then do that as well. Now, that doesn't have to be difficult. You don't have to go and source stock from China. Outlet villages, for example, have great deals. Not everything is a great deal, but you can walk around an outlet village looking at different brands with an eBay app to see what it's selling for on eBay versus what you can buy it for. And you'll be surprised at the amount of products that you can buy for less. Again, another way of earning income. So yes, you do have to be a bit creative. And yes, you do have to put a bit of effort in. But so you should. Because now you're creating something. You're creating an income for yourself. And of course, you can take this even further and start a full-blown business. But the good news is you don't have to. And for most people, you probably shouldn't, because it is a lot harder than people think. But I've given you a handful of ideas that you can implement yourself, or use it to think of other ideas to go and start creating revenue streams for yourself.
So everything we've covered in this episode is pretty basic. There's nothing in here that's going to take effort for you to understand. Once you hear it, it should all be pretty intuitive. And really, that's all you need. There is nothing complicated about this. You just have to do it. And you don't even have to take it too far. In fact, you could easily take it too far and get into the realms of diminishing returns. So if you've got money in a savings account that's earning 0% interest, and you can find one that pays 1.5% interest, then depending on the amount of money involved, that could well be worth your time switching. But then, say you spot another account that pays 1.55% interest. Is it worth switching? Probably not, unless you're talking about vast amounts of money. The amount of extra interest you earn will be tiny, and the time you spend doing that might be better spent elsewhere, maybe implementing some of the money-making ideas that Rob talked about, which will have a far higher payoff with the same amount of time. Everyone's only got a certain amount of time and if we're honest, a certain amount of energy that we can give to this rather than other parts of our lives. So make sure that you're investing that time wisely. And then after you've done it once, make sure you keep that discipline, because that really is what this is about, discipline. It doesn't mean you have to deprive yourself of everything. It doesn't mean you have to painstakingly track your spending and your investments every single day. But do get into the habit of those regular reviews. Only has to be every 6 to 12 months, and that will make sure that you're staying on the right track. If you just take these very simple steps and you repeat them regularly, you might not see a massive change in 6 months. You might not even see a massive change in a year. But let a few years go by. Let those savings build up, turn those savings into investments, and it's incredible the big difference that these tiny little actions can compound into.
Now, we haven't got a Hub Extra for you this week. We've got a hat trick, you lucky so-and-sos. We've got 3 different resources that you can use now to make your life a bit better. And remember, the Hub Extra is backed up by the Hub Extra email that goes out to all Property Hub members every single Friday. And if you're not a Property Hub member, why not? It's completely free. Just go to the website, sign up, become a member, and get the Hub Extra email with even more extra goodiness every single Friday. So, Rob, let's do it. What's our first resource?
Okay, well, earlier on I mentioned in passing that I'm not one for budgeting, but I did go through a long period of tracking my spending on a daily basis. There's lots of apps that you can use for that. The one that I used was called Toshl, Toshl, free and really easy to use. Well, so the link to that and all the others will be in the show notes. If you do want to get more into actual budgeting, then a tool that is very popular is youneedabudget.com. It's a piece of software that you could use to build your budget. But more than that, there's a whole philosophy behind it. There's lots of education around how to budget, and there's a community around it as well. So it turns budgeting from something quite dry into a really positive thing. I was about to say exciting. I don't know if I'd go that far. But if you are thinking, it's really time I put a budget together, that will be an excellent starting point.
Another excellent starting point if you want to expand on your knowledge further is the book The Richest Man in Babylon. It's an absolute classic, and I think we talked about this book in the first 10 episodes of the podcast. That's how important it is. If you are new to the world of money and finance, then this book is a great jumping off point. It teaches you the disciplines of money in a really accessible way. It's told through stories, and those stories are really interesting in themselves, but the lessons that you get from the stories are so powerful. If you are really accomplished with money and finance, this may be too basic for you. But if you are relatively new to the world of investment and money and finance, well, pick it up. It's a book that had a big impact on me many years ago, and I'd highly recommend it for anybody starting out.
Well, one line item that you won't need to account for in your new disciplined financial life is the Property Podcast, because it's completely free. Multiple episodes every week. It'll cost you nothing. And there's so much more as well. There's all our free courses at propertyhub.net/university. There's loads of extra goodies on our YouTube channel. And as if that weren't enough, if you've got a spare moment left, you can keep up with what we're doing on all the socials. We're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Property Hub UK.
So that's us done for another week. We'll be back on Tuesday for Ask Rob and Rob. We'll be back tomorrow for our market updates that we're doing every Friday at the moment. And then on Tuesday, it'll be Ask Rob and Rob. We'll be answering your property questions. And of course, we'll be back next Thursday with the Property Podcast. So until then, take care, everyone. Have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.